Hello everyone, my name is Holger and this is the third part of a 6-part video series that previews the upcoming Season 2 of the Wheel of Time TV show. If you have not watched the earlier parts yet, then I strongly recommend you do so first. The link to the playlist should be at the top of your screen. In this third part I will continue the deep dives with all characters who stayed behind in the Eastern Rand lands. This means everyone except Perrin and Loial. Spoiler warning, this video does contain spoilers. I recommend that before watching this video you watch the first season of the TV show and read all of the books first, up until book 14, A Memory of Light, plus the prequel New Spring, in order to avoid having your reading enjoyment spoiled. We are back in the Eastern Rand lands now, at the beginning of Season 2. The first character we need to talk about is Min. I already mentioned in a previous video that I expect Min to have evacuated to her childhood home, which was likely either in Tar Valon or in a village near Tar Valon, based on her statement that she had her first vision in an alleyway of Tar Valon. The main reason why I expect Min to have evacuated there is because there has been a casting announcement for 2 of Min's aunts. We know from the books that Min grew up with her aunts. That is probably the place where we see Min in one of the sneak peek videos. In another shot we see Rand near a similarly looking window that may belong to the same house. It is not the same window though. The window in Min's shot has long vertical wooden beams going all the way from top to bottom, with shorter horizontal beams staggered in between. The window in Rand's shot is constructed in the opposite way, with long horizontal beams going side to side and shorter vertical beams staggered in between. Still, the windows look similar enough to assume that they belong to the same house. There are alternative explanations though. For example, in a shot with Rand standing next to the window, he might be in some other place he went to after leaving the Blight. Possibly the place where he then first encounters Ishamael, and he might then go to Min's place from there. Assuming this is Min's place, the house is likely not in Tar Valon, but in a village near Tar Valon based on the look of the house. The wooden exterior does not match any of the Tar Valon designs we see in the show. The website Outpost VFX has close-ups for some of the building designs and layouts used for building the city of Tar Valon in the show. There have been suggestions that the house could be in a completely different place, for example in Cairhien or Falme. Both of these ideas are probably unlikely. Cairhien has stone buildings in the interior of the city, and the houses in the foregate of Cairhien look much more ramshackle than the pretty neat and sturdy arrangement of wooden beams shown in the shots of Min and Rand. Also, having Min and Cairhien would mean that Min's aunts at some point moved from near Tar Valon to Cairhien, which from a storytelling perspective seems unnecessary and would just add more travel time, since Min needs to be in Tar Valon at the end of the season for her Season 3 storyline. Falme is also unlikely, mostly based on timing. Min evacuated from Fadera at the end of Season 1, and there would have been no time for her to get all the way to Falme for her to be there early in the season. So if the house we see Min in is in Falme, it could not be the place she evacuated to. It would have to be some other house she went to during the season. This also means she would have to travel to Falme sometime during Season 2. This would create timing problems, because one of Min's aunts has been cast for episodes 3 or 4, and we can probably assume her to be in the house Min evacuated to, together with Min at that time. That would give Min only half of a season to travel to Falme and back, which is not enough time, especially since she would not be able to use any kind of magic or transport in both directions. We know from the books that the travel time from Falme to Tar Valon is several months. Min makes a slightly shorter trip in Book 3 from a mountain camp near Falme to Tar Valon, and that takes almost all of Book 3. The main reason why the theory of Min being in Falme has come up is because in the shot showing Min in the wooden building, Min has the side of her head shaved, which is something some of the Seanchan do. However, I don't think this theory is correct, because Min already had a very similar haircut in Season 1, where she also had the side of her head shaved. The only differences are a slightly different hairline and the fact that her hair has regrown a bit more, probably 10 to 14 days or so in the Season 1 shot. This means in the Season 1 shot, it has simply been a bit longer since Kay Alexander had her last haircut, but she wore her hair in mostly the same way, so Min's haircut does not seem to be related to the Seanchan in any way. So what it comes down to is that a village near Tar Valon seems like the most likely place for Min to be early in Season 2. Let's look at Rand next, and specifically where he has wandered off to. At this early stage of the season, Rand still believes that he has won the last battle, that the Dark One has been caged, and that his task as the Dragon Reborn has been completed. Since he used saidin in the process, He assumes that he will eventually go mad, and he tries to stay away from other people, especially his friends, to avoid hurting them. So where would you have gone in that case? First, there has been a leak about a year ago by a third-party survey agency that was supposed to represent a synopsis of Season 2. Overall, it looks reasonably authentic, and for the most is unsurprising, except for one phrase. Following after Rand hiding in the cosmopolitan city of Falme as he tries to fight off madness. First of all, one could argue that Falme is not a cosmopolitan city, but beyond that it is not clear how the idea of Rand hiding in Falme could fit into the storyline. Some fans seem to think that this means that Rand will be in Falme early in the season, since that seems to be when he has run away from everyone and is worried he might go mad, but this does not make sense for several reasons. Rand would then have to find a way to get to Falme early in the season, then back to Cairhien later, where we have seen him, and then back to Falme again for the season finale. That seems highly unlikely and logistically extremely difficult. Also, since Rand is worried that he might harm other people around him due to his future madness, it would not make sense for him to then hide in a city, in a place where there are a lot of people. I can only see two ways to make sense of this statement. One possibility is that it is meant situationally. This means that at some point in Season 2, Rand will be hiding from someone while in Falme, and while also trying to combat madness. He might, for example, hide from the Seanchan while planning how to get access to the Horn. The other, perhaps more likely explanation is that Amazon may have purposefully injected a fake sentence into the synopsis that they gave to an external company, just so that they could track down a potential leak to its source later. This sort of thing is not unusual when privileged information is given to third parties prior to a public release. In any case, I am going to basically ignore that statement, since it is not clear whether it has any relevance, and will assume that Rand did not go to Falme at the beginning of the season. So let's go back to the question of where he has gone. Since the madness will probably not become fatal for him very soon, it would have to be a place away from other people, but also a place that can sustain life. This means he would not be able to stay in the Blight. It would most likely be a remote area somewhere in the countryside. Beyond that, we really have no idea where he went. The only potential hint is Dragonmount, because that is the only place that has any meaning for him in the area, and about which he was curious in Season 1. That scene in Season 1 was almost certainly foreshadowing, but it is not clear if it was foreshadowing for much later in the series, during Veins of Gold, or for an earlier event. He might go to Dragonmount in Season 2 out of curiosity, then later during Veins of Gold remember Dragonmount and go there again. At some point Rand needs to understand that he has been wrong, that his task as the Dragon Reborn is not finished, that he did not cage the Dark One, and that the person he thinks of as the Dark One is really Ishamael. Eventually he also needs to understand that the other Forsaken have been freed as well, but that last piece of knowledge can come later, since it is not necessary for Rand to change course. Once Rand realizes that his task still lies ahead of him, he would understand that he has to get back to civilization. The first question is how he can be convinced of the situation. I believe the one person who can do that is Ishamael himself. One possibility is that he could appear in Rand's dreams and then arrange for the dream to have a lasting impact on real life, the way he did in Episode 2 with the bats. The other possibility is for him to simply see Rand in person now that he is free. Either way, once Rand sees him affecting the real world, it would become clear to Rand that he is not the caged Dark One, and that should be enough for Rand to understand his situation. I don't see that anyone else could do this other than Ishamael. Normal people would neither have that knowledge, nor would Rand believe them. Other Forsaken, for example Lanfear, would have the knowledge, but Rand would not trust them. I expect the first encounter between Rand and Ishamael to happen very early in Season 2, probably in Episode 1, with others to follow later. After that meeting, Rand would decide to go back to civilization, and the next question is where. As I mentioned earlier, I expect him to go to Min's place, mostly because he has very few other options. He would not want to go back to Fardara, since there he would run into his Two Rivers friends. Also from an out-of-story perspective, in Season 1 Min had a viewing that Rand would not return from the Eye of the World. Rand initially interpreted that as not surviving the events at the Eye, but it looks like what Min actually saw is that Rand would not return specifically to Fardara. The show needs to ensure that the viewing turns out to be true, so Rand cannot return to Fardara. Other than Min's place, there is no place nearby he is likely to go. There are still two complications here. One is how he would know where Min lives, and the other one is how he would know that Min has evacuated from Fardara. The order for the evacuation was given after Rand had already left Fardara. As for the first question, Min might have told him where her childhood home was the night before Rand left, when Rand and Min apparently spent some time together. Regarding the evacuation, we don't know how Rand knew. Ishamael might have told him, or Rand may have seen the long line of people coming out of Hadera from the Blight. Most likely the show will not even bother explaining this. At some point Rand will likely also be visited by Lanfear, most likely in her Selene persona. We don't know exactly when that will happen, but since we know that Lanfear has been cast for this season, a Rand-Selene encounter is very likely. In the books, one of the important functions that Selene has for Rand's storyline is to introduce him to portal stones, and there's a chance that this may also happen in the show, although it is not clear exactly how. This brings us to the question what kind of magic transport will be used later for getting from Cairhien to Falme, and in Season 3 from Falme to the Idle Waste. I touched on that in the previous video, and there are basically 5 options. The ways, traveling, skimming, portal stones, and some new or hybrid transport. Let's look into this some more now. To go through the ways, they would need a person who can navigate the ways. So far that's Ogiers and Padan Fain. There have also been hints that the Trollocs got to the 2 rivers through the ways, so it is probably not just Padan Fain, but also other members of the Shadow who have that ability. That would also explain how Liandrin will take Egwene to Falme later. We know that Moiraine does not know how to navigate the ways, even though she can open a waygate, because if she knew, then she would not have asked Loial for help in Season 1. So if the ways are not used, then what about some variation of it? This means a hybrid transport that works more like portal stones, but uses existing waygates. That is not likely either, because it leads to multiple problems. First, waygates are part of the ways, and were given to Ogiers as a gift. It would not make sense to have waygates in the Idle Waste, because there are no steadings there, so this transport would not work for the beginning of Season 3. Also, without going through the ways, there would have to be some way to tell a waygate where to go. This means waygates would need symbols on them on the outside, like portal stones in the books. We have seen waygates from all angles, and they don't have symbols. Another suggestion was that perhaps Rand tries to open a waygate, does it incorrectly, and the waygate then takes them to their destination instead. That would not work either, because the weave to open a waygate does not contain any information about the destination. It just opens a connection to the ways, so the waygate would not have any way of knowing where Rand wants to go, not even by accident. On top of that, this would be terrible storytelling. Random, unexpected events like that are always supposed to be harmful to the protagonist, not helpful. That's because the audience would feel cheated if the solution to a problem was given to a protagonist for free, unearned, as the result of an unexpected effect. This is a basic rule of storytelling. I don't see any way to reuse waygates for a mechanism similar to portal stones that would make sense in a show, and I don't see the writers doing that. If they had wanted to do that, then they would have prepared for that already in Season 1, for example by changing the appearance of waygates in a way that allows them to be reused in a different way later. The easiest option would have been to put symbols on the back of waygates. What about traveling or skimming? The problem with giving that ability to Rand this early is that it would likely break part of the Season 3 storyline and create a plot hole. Instead of Rand having to follow Couladin, he could simply jump ahead of him by traveling or skimming to block Jangai Pass and prevent Couladin from getting to Cairhien. That would completely break the Season 3 storyline. Also, giving Rand this ability so early would take some of the surprise away when Aviendha later discovers traveling accidentally, leading to the igloo scene. That leaves us with portal stones, which is the most likely method of transport. Portal stones also have the advantage of not requiring changes from the books, and they're the easiest way to introduce Flicker Flicker in the show, if that is what the writers decide to do. Rand needs to learn a few things about portal stones, most importantly that they exist, what they do, how to use them, and how to pick the right symbol. This could be done in part by Selene in the same way as in the books, but there are also several other ways. For example, Min might give him some of that information if she has a vision of Rand using a portal stone. Some of the information could also come from Moiraine, or later in the season from Alanna. There is yet another way how Rand could get most or all of that information much later in the season. I will cover that in the next part of this video series, when I get to the events later in the season. Going back to the actual plot, Rand will eventually get to Min's place, and we will pick up the storyline again a bit later, once Lan and Moiraine join them. So let's switch to Moiraine. The most important point to discuss about Moiraine at this stage is how she lost her powers, since that is crucial for her whole Season 2 storyline, and even beyond Season 2. Specifically, there's the question whether she is shielded or stilled. At the end of the last video, I suggested that viewers should watch one of my other videos, which discusses the shielded versus stilled issue. The link to the video is at the top of your screen. If you have not watched that video yet and also don't want to interrupt this video now, here's a brief summary of my findings. Moiraine had a shield applied to her and tied off, but she also had a stilling weave used on her. Note the similarity of the weave Ishamael used on her compared to the weave that was used to gentle Logain. Also, both Logain and Moiraine were in pain while the weave was active. The only difference between the Moiraine and Logain scenes is that after Logain's gentling, we saw saidin escape from his body, and that has not happened for Moiraine yet. Here's what I think is the reason for that difference. It looks like Moiraine is both stilled and shielded at the end of Season 1, but the stilling has not fully gone into effect yet, mostly because the shield is interfering with the effects of the stilling. It is holding Moiraine's connection to the one power inside of her body while the shield is active, and that is why we don't see saidar escaping from her body. However, if the shield were to ever be removed, then the stilling probably would go fully into effect. This means we would see saidar exit her body, in the same way we saw it with Logain. So why would the writers do this, and how is it connected to Moiraine being imprisoned in the White Tower at the end of Season 2, which I suggested in the last part of this video series would happen? I think all of this is part of setting up a much longer story arc for Moiraine that goes beyond Season 2 and extends well into Seasons 3 and 4. The intention of the writers is for Moiraine to take over the role that Siuan has in the books. This means to go to Salidar with Min, Logain, and possibly Leane in Season 3, and then advocate for Egwene to be raised as Amyrlin, and after that to act as Egwene's advisor in Salidar. Long term, beyond Season 3, I believe the writers intend to merge the storylines of Book Siuan and Book Moiraine into a single character, and that will be Show Moiraine. There is more than one indication in Season 1 that something like this will happen, and it would have multiple benefits for the show, related to the roles of Rosamund Pike and Sophie Okonedo on the show, and would also help balance the distribution of show leads across story arcs better for Season 3. I'll talk about this a lot more in the Season 3 preview section of this video series, in Part 6. If that is the writer's intent, then it makes sense to ensure that Moiraine ends up stilled at the end of Season 2 and imprisoned in the tower, since that is exactly where Siuan was following the coup, so Moiraine could seamlessly drop into Siuan's storyline. The stilling part is important because it would allow Moiraine to lie in Salidar, and also because it makes Moiraine less of a threat to the Salidar sitters. The fact that she is imprisoned would make it possible for Moiraine to leave along with Min, Logain, and Leane in a single group. So if that is the writer's intent, then why create this combination of stilling and shielding, instead of just stilling Moiraine outright at the end of Season 1? I can see two reasons for this. The first reason is that stilling her would have caused the water bond to break, so once Moiraine and Lan take Nynaeve and Egwene to the tower, Moiraine would likely have felt obligated to send Lan off with Nynaeve. That could have caused all kinds of plot complications later, because then Lan would likely also have been in Tanchico with Nynaeve, and after that in Ibu Dar, which would have made it unnecessary for Mat to join them, creating huge ripple effects in the plot. Keeping the water bond intact prevents all of that. Second, Moiraine will likely find out early in Season 2 that she's not fully stilled, and that will give her hope to try and get her powers back. This is important for Season 2 because it will be the reason why she goes to Verin and after that to Cairhien. This means the whole Season 2 storyline would not have worked if Moiraine had been fully stilled too early. Having her believe that she's only shielded also helps tell the story of Moraine's and Lan's past in Season 2, which the writers clearly wanted to do. This brings up the question when and how Moiraine will come to the conclusion that she's not fully stilled, and that there is hope for her to get her powers back. At the end of Season 1, Moiraine apparently thinks she is stilled, based on the way she cries in Lan's arms, which makes sense because as a saidar channeler, she was unable to see the saidin weaves Ishamael used, so the only way she could determine what happened to her was based on her own sensations. She was unable to touch saidar, and she felt pain during Ishamael's weaves, which does not happen when being shielded, so Moiraine must have come to the conclusion that she was stilled. Early in Season 2, the show must ensure that Moiraine changes her mind on that and believes that she still has a way to get her powers back in order for the storyline in Season 2 to work. There are several ways in which this could happen. One possibility is that she tries to lie and finds that she is still unable to. That's presuming, of course, that her stilling has not advanced to the point where she can lie yet. I don't think this is how Moiraine will find out though, and that's because in the books Aes Sedai don't seem to know that stilling removes the 3 oaths. At least in the books, the sitters in Salidar never suspect that Siuan is able to lie, or they would have been more suspicious about her. So Moiraine probably has no reason to assume that her inability to lie means that she has not been stilled. Another possibility is that Moiraine realizes that stilling breaks the water bond, and the bond with Lan has not broken yet. This is more likely, but probably also not conclusive. The water bond was masked when Ishamael used his weaves, and Moiraine probably does not know what would happen if a person is stilled while the bond is masked. From Moiraine's and Lan's point of view, it is theoretically possible that Lan's bond has already broken, just in a different way and less violently than it otherwise would have. Moiraine and Lan cannot tell the difference, because they were unable to feel each other through the bond even before Ishamael's weave, and that part has not changed. A third possibility is that Min has a viewing seeing Moiraine channel in the future. That would certainly tell Moiraine that she's only shielded, because at this point in the storyline, stilling is considered irreversible. I don't think that this is what the show will use though, because that kind of a viewing would later, after Moiraine is fully stilled, predict the fact that stilling will be healable in the future, both to Moiraine and to viewers. The writers would probably want to keep this a secret at this time, both to Moiraine as well as to non-book readers. A fourth possibility is that Moiraine might be able to feel the knot on her tied-off shield. We know that Rand is able to do that at Dumai's Wells, even though he is a saidin channeler, and the weaves that shield him are made of saidar. However, in that scene, Rand has not been gentled in any way, not even partially, when he did that. It is questionable whether Moiraine would be able to feel the knot in her current state. A fifth possibility, and perhaps the most likely option, is that Rand detects that a weave has been placed on Moiraine, and that weave has not dissipated when Rand and Moiraine meet at Min's place later. Rand would probably not be able to determine the type of weave, or be able to remove it, but at least this would give Moiraine a reason to investigate the matter further, perhaps by talking to Verin, and would at least get Moiraine's storyline started. I'll talk about the way I expect Moiraine's shield to be removed a bit later in the next video, once we get to that part of the storyline. For now, let's look at the beginning of Moiraine's storyline in Season 2. Both Moiraine and Lan start off at the Eye of the World and will head back to Faldera since they saw Trollocs march onto Faldera earlier and have to be worried about everyone they left behind there. Nynaeve and Egwene are still waiting for Lan to return, and once Moiraine and Lan reach Faldera, all of them will head to Tarvalon. Nynaeve and Egwene will enter the tower as novices, and Moiraine and Lan will continue on to Min's place. Before continuing with Moraine's journey, let's look at the events in the tower first. Elayne likely arrived earlier, possibly even with Siuan in Season 1, when Siuan returned from a trip to Caemlyn. There's relatively little we know about the events in the tower early in Season 2, but here are a few individual points. Egwene and Elayne meet, apparently in Egwene's room, and that may also be how Elayne is introduced to viewers. This has been hinted at by a scene shown exclusively at Comic-Con. Egwene and Elayne likely will become friends in the early part of Season 2, similar to the books. Egwene was seen doing chores. Egwene would likely see Mat in his prison cell early in Season 2. This was hinted at by 2 shots shown in the sneak peek videos. We have seen Elayne with a lantern as well, apparently in the same basement. She could be visiting Mat, or this could be part of a search for evidence during the Black Archer hunt later. What Series has made a casting discovery for the role of Elsa Treehill, a novice in the tower. Redanian intelligence suggested that she may have filmed with Liandrin and Egwene. I believe that Elsa Treehill is closely tied to a Season 1 secret, and that we will see that secret get revealed during Season 2 in a conversation between Elsa and Egwene. I'll explain this in more detail in part 6 of this video series, when I talk about all of the secrets in Season 1. Nynaeve will have her accepted test sometime during Season 2. We don't know yet whether this will happen right at the beginning as in the books or a bit later. We have 2 hints that the accepted test will be shown though. One is a shot in which Nynaeve does not have her braid and is seen in a field with unusual lighting. The other hint is a casting discovery for the role of Elnor Sr., likely Nynaeve's mother. We don't know if Egwene's accepted test will be shown as well. This is probably unlikely because I don't think the show will have 2 accepted tests in a single season. Also in the show there's no need for Egwene to even become an accepted before she leaves the tower. In the books this was needed because Egwene needs to have a ring so she can impersonate an Aes Sedai later on her journey to Tyr. In the show that part of the story will be cut, so it would be possible for the show to have Egwene remain a novice until she's raised to Amyrlin later, in Salidar. Eventually Egwene will be taken to the Seanchan by Liandrin. We don't know exactly how that will happen. For example, if Liandrin will lure her there, pretending she can help Rand, as in the books, or if she will be taken there more forcefully. We also don't know how they will get to Falme. The Ways are the most likely possibility for that. Egwene will be enslaved as a Damani, but we don't have any details beyond that. Egwene's abduction will likely be combined with a wider raid of the Black Archer on the White Tower, during which multiple Black Archer sisters leave at the same time, taking ter'angreals with them. This means the show will likely combine the Book 2 events of abducting Egwene with the Book 3 events leading to the Black Archer hunt. During the Man in North Harbor scene in Season 1, we found out that Liandrin knew that she had been uncovered as a Black Archer member. More about that in the Season 1 Secrets section in Part 6 of this video series. This means Liandrin knew that she had to eventually leave the tower and probably had prepared for this moment since that scene in Season 1. In the White Tower, we can expect at least 2 separate investigations into the Black Archer raid to start. One of them will be started by Nynaeve, who will realize that Egwene is missing and will try to find out what happened to her. I expect this to start as a simple missing person search, which will expand in scope once Siuan gives Nynaeve more information about the background of Egwene's abduction. I expect Nynaeve to also include Elayne and Mat in this. More about Mat in a moment. If we get to see Greymen in the show, then this will likely happen during this investigation. I think Greymen are the most likely new type of shadow spawn we can expect to see in Season 2. The odd couple relationship between Nynaeve and Elayne, which in the books starts in Falme, will likely start during this investigation. The show needs to establish this early enough so that by the time they reach Tanchico, that dynamic already exists. Another person who might also help out Nynaeve and Elayne is Alanna. Whether that happens depends on how much Alanna knows about Liandrin and how much Moiraine trusted her during Season 1. I will talk about this more in the next video because this will become important later in this season. The other investigation will likely be started by the Red Archer, which in the show has been characterized as a general law enforcement Archer, not just an Archer that tracks down men who can channel. This additional purpose of the Red Archer was likely added by the writers for this specific situation. If the Red Archer runs the investigation into the Black Archer, then they would likely be embarrassed by having to investigate a sister who they thought was one of their own, and they would likely want to deflect blame onto someone else, for example Siuan. I expect the show to introduce Elaida in this context. This means Elaida will likely be the Red Archer's sister who heads the investigation into the Black Archer raid. This will put Elaida into an excellent position for her coup later if Elaida decides to target Siuan in the investigation and finds information that would incriminate Siuan in some way. Siuan is vulnerable in this matter, not just because of the secrets she has kept with Moiraine, but also because of other secrets related to Liandrin that I will cover in Part 6 of this video series. Going back to Nynaeve and Elayne, there is one more event worth mentioning, and that is Nynaeve's sword training or sparring with Wardress in the White Tower. I don't think this is formal sword training. It is more likely just a way for Nynaeve to vent some anger during the sparring session, probably offered by the Wardress. I expect this to happen after the Black Archer investigation has already started. Nynaeve would have so many reasons to be angry at this point that it would certainly make sense for her to look for an outlet for that anger. Here are just a few possible reasons. Egwene has been abducted. Nynaeve is not finding any clues about Egwene's whereabouts. Nynaeve was fooled by Liandrin, even after Nynaeve had already characterized Liandrin as a snake earlier. Nynaeve may be upset about something that had happened during her accepted test. Nynaeve may be treated unfairly by Aes Sedai because she is a wilder. Nynaeve may be treated unfairly by other accepted because she was raised to accept it very quickly. Nynaeve may be unable to channel because of her block, and probably several other reasons, not that it takes all that much to make Nynaeve angry anyway. I mentioned earlier that Mat will likely be included in the investigation. Let's look at Mat's background and storyline for Season 2 next. We have last seen Mat entering Tar Valon, and have found out that at some point after that he was captured and imprisoned in the White Tower, probably because of an order given by Moiraine at the end of last season. In a scene shown exclusively at Comic-Con, Liandrin talked to Mat in his prison cell and told him that he was being held to ensure that the dagger did not have any lingering effects on him. There are 2 health-related concerns that we need to talk about regarding Mat. The first one is the so-called darkness Moiraine diagnosed in him. The way Moiraine described it made it sound like the darkness is related to the Dark One and the Shadow, making Mat susceptible to the influence of evil, and that this is why Moiraine did not object to Mat staying behind in Tar Valon. This last part is likely a change caused by Barney Harris leaving the show. We have to assume the original plan was to take Mat to the Eye of the World, regardless of whatever darkness may have been in him, so the darkness was originally probably not considered that serious. Associating Mat's darkness with the Dark One and the Shadow was probably just a plot device introduced after Barney Harris left the show to explain why Moiraine did not push harder for Mat to join them. I think in Season 2 the writers will reframe the term darkness somewhat and treat it as a combination of dark thoughts and dark mood, probably as a manifestation of depression or some other mental condition. That condition probably has been latent in Mat for a long time, perhaps caused by his family situation, and it then fed on the dagger and it became much worse. This condition may be healable though. The next issue to look at is Mat's connection to the dagger. I believe that at this point Mat is fully separated from the dagger and the dagger is not needed for any future healing. Requiring the dagger for healing would cause plot complications, because the dagger is currently with Pat and Fane, and not likely to be retrievable before the end of the season, if then. So requiring the dagger for healing would give us another season of Dagger Matt, which Rafe has made clear he does not want. I think the way the connection to the dagger will be characterized is as a form of addiction. While Matt was in possession of the dagger, it affected his body and mind directly, like any addictive substance. Once he was separated from the dagger, Matt was in acute withdrawal, causing an urge to seek out the dagger, which is why he stayed behind and re-entered Travelon. After Matt was captured, the task for the Yellow Alja would be the equivalent of some sort of controlled form of withdrawal, similar to a methadone treatment, to break the urge to seek out the dagger. The addiction would still not be fully healed after that. It would remain present but latent. If Matt ever comes into contact with the dagger again, the addiction could reassert itself, which is something Moiraine also mentioned. Another interesting attribute of show Matt compared to book Matt is that show Matt has always wanted to go back home to the Two Rivers. He never wanted to leave in the first place, and only left once he saw a second wave of Trollocs coming down the mountain. He then repeatedly suggested to Rand that they return back to the Two Rivers, and also asked Dana what the best way is to get back. He probably would have left Rand after Breen Springs if it hadn't been for Dana's attack, and to claim that a Fade was pursuing them. After the events at the Grinwell farm, Matt started wondering whether he is the Dragon Reborn, which we see later when he talks to Moiraine and Tar Valon, and that is what prevented him from going back home. So basically, the writers first changed Matt's character so he wants to go back home, but then kept preventing him from actually doing that throughout Season 1. They had to prevent him from going back home, because going back home so early would have broken his future story arc, since he needs to go through the Redstone Doorframe first, in order to set him up for future events. This theme needs to continue in Season 2. This means the writers need to keep preventing him from going back home in various ways, even though he still wants to go home. We already know that early in Season 2 he will be imprisoned, which will certainly prevent him from going home. Later in the season he will probably be included in a search for Egwene, which will also be more important for him at the time than going back home, because it will give him a way to make up for leaving the group at the end of Season 1. This topic of Matt wanting to go back home and looking for an opportunity to do that will likely become even more important in Season 3, and I will talk about that in Part 6 of this video series. First about Matt's storyline for Season 2 though. Early in the season, Matt is imprisoned in a tower, and there are two reasons for it, an in-story reason and an out-of-story reason. The in-story reason is that Moiraine had asked for Matt to be captured, and after that there's the concern about lingering effects from the dagger. The more important out-of-story reason is that Matt cannot be allowed to go back home. This will continue until the show can give Matt another task to do, which will prevent him from going home, which will likely be helping with the search for Egwene in the city of Tar Valon, not in the tower. As a man, Matt can do certain things that are harder to do for a woman, for example blend in with men who are gambling in taverns and ask them if they had seen anything suspicious. This will probably lead to events similar to Matt's Lucky Day in Book 3. The big question is whether we will get his Garwin Galad fight in Season 2. There is no clear evidence for this one way or another. Some fans have used a photo that shows Matt sparring in the tower as evidence, but I don't see it that way. The man on the right side does not appear to be Matt. His stature, size, and hair are different. He uses a spear, not a quarterstaff, and his clothing is wrong. Late in Season 1, Matt wears the same old ragged clothing he has worn throughout Season 1, and we see him wear the same clothing again late in Season 2 in Falme. It makes no sense for him to have much nicer, better fitting clothing in the middle of the season, then switch back to his old clothing later. So this picture in the tower does not appear to be related to Matt at all. Other than that, we have very little information. Rafe was asked a question about that fight at Comic-Con events, and he stated that they were building to a believable version of the fight in the show. The wording suggests to me that they had not actually filmed the fight yet, and since that interview happened after Season 2 had wrapped, that would mean that the fight is not in Season 2. This is not really conclusive though. Rafe may just have worded his response awkwardly. The other hint we have is casting sites for Garwin, discovered by What Series, in which Garwin talks about being in a city preparing to be sacked. That city is almost certainly Cairhien, waiting for the Shaidu to break through the city walls during the battle for Cairhien. That battle cannot possibly be in Season 2. The earliest and most likely season is Season 3. That could mean the casting sites were for Season 3. This means that Garwin had not been cast for Season 2 at all, in which case the fight obviously could not happen in Season 2. However, the casting sites could also have been for Season 2. Perhaps Garwin has so few lines in Season 2 that the writers decided to add some preliminary Season 3 lines to the casting sites to have enough material for auditioning. The time at which the casting sites were discovered would work either way for season 2 or 3. Of course, even if Gawain were to appear in season 2, there would still be no guarantee to see that fight in season 2. Overall, this chance of seeing that fight in season 2 does not look great to me. We might still see it in season 3 though. Back to Matt's storyline, I expect him to continue his search for Egwene and Tar Valon without success until a bit later in the season when Moiraine, Lan and Rand return to Tar Valon. This covers most of the events in the Tower and Tar Valon in the first 2/3 of the season. There will also be some politics in the season, probably involving Siuan, Liandrin, Elaida and Alanna, but I'll get back to that in the next part of the video series. Let's go back to Moiraine's group now. After staying at Min's place, Moiraine will send Min to the Tower. The in-story reason for that is so Min can help Siuan with her visions, and the out-of-story reason is for Min to be in the Tower in time for Elaida's coup. Meanwhile, Moiraine, Lan and Rand will head to Veren's place, or to the place of any other Brown sister, so they can ask the various questions. It could also be Adelias and Vendine, as in the books. I theorized earlier that Veren probably lives some distance away from Tar Valon for out-of-story reasons, so the trip to Veren's place takes long enough for Rand to get sword-trained by Lan. I just want to make clear that this is highly speculative, because we don't know whether Rand will actually be a Blade Master by the end of Season 2. The fights against Turak and Ishamael might happen differently, for example involve other members of our group, and possibly even be ensemble fights, in which case Rand would not have to be a Blade Master. The show could theoretically give Rand only some limited sword training in Season 2, and delay some of Rand's training until a later season, for example until he gets to Cairhien or Caemlyn. In that case, Veren could live much closer by, possibly even in Tar Valon. There would still have to be a trip through a wooded, remote area for the Fade attacks to happen, but that could be during a separate, much shorter trip. We just don't know. The strongest hint so far that Rand really will be sword-trained to a pretty advanced level in Season 2 is that in an interview with CBR, Rafe confirmed that Lan says the words, "Cat crosses the courtyard" in Season 2, so this at least hints at sword forms playing a role in Season 2, probably when training Rand. So if we assume that Rand will get fully sword-trained during Season 2, and that this will happen during the trip to Veren, where would Veren live? It would probably not be to the north of Tar Valon, because the terrain there gets rockier and drier, as we have seen in the pictures from Fodera. Northwest might be a possibility. To the west is Dragonmount. To the southwest we get to more heavily traveled routes. This means this is unlikely. Same for the southeast, which is where the trade route to Cairhien is. The most likely destination is probably east of Tar Valon. As for real-world locations, we know that some filming was done in Italy, and none of these locations have been accounted for so far. One of them is a small town, the other two locations are Macerias. This means large farmhouses. The small town seems like the most likely location for Veren's place. Since that town is built into hills, a suitable in-story location would be the foothills of the Dragon Wall. As I mentioned earlier, there would have to be a period of time when Moiraine separates from the rest of the group, for the out-of-story reason that she needs to be alone to be attacked by a Fade. The in-story reason could be Moiraine pushing Lan away, as Rosamund Pike has hinted at, and also Moiraine trying to avoid having Veren get too close to Rand. We should be close to 2/3 of the way through the season now, and I will end the video at this point and finish up the deep dives in the next video. Thanks everyone for watching, I hope you've had fun, and please join me again for the next video in the series. Also please like, subscribe and leave comments. The description of this video has links for all source material used in the creation of the video. Thanks again, and that's it for now.